So welcome to this session on LLMs, and we're looking at LLM-powered scraping and textual analysis. My name's Kim, and my colleague Daniel is in the room with you. And we're both from the Melbourne Data Analytics Platform, specifically within the University of Melbourne. And I'm a research data specialist, and my background is in digital media research. So at MDAP, we work with researchers from across the whole university. So I've worked on projects in law about misinformation during elections. I've worked on projects from philosophy, looking at explainable AI, also in medicine, and so we do a whole range of really different things. But I do a lot of natural language processing and text mining, especially social media data, but also from websites. And of course, today that means learning a lot about large language models and how to use Gen AI. So I might get Daniel to just briefly introduce yourself.
Thanks, Kim. Is this? I don't know if this is amplified or not. Can you hear me okay in the room? Yeah. So I'm also a data specialist with MDAP. I've been with the group with Kim since we started mid-2019. And I've actually got a music background. I spent a few years working in France at the University of Tours, south of Paris, on some music and data projects. And I actually got into the computational sciences and data science through music and through languages. And music was actually a very good training ground for learning a lot of these techniques, because it's very difficult to work with when you compare it to spreadsheets and other kinds of data. I was doing things like making transcriptions and sort of exporting that to XML and then using that as a basis for my analysis. Luckily, I still get to work on some music projects, which is nice. But of course, in my job at MDAP now, everybody wants to work with AI tools of different kinds and in different capacities. So we spend a lot of time helping people to do this well, because these tools are very powerful, but it also takes quite a bit to understand how to use them effectively and to know which models to use and in what context and everything else. Cool.
So I'm just going to give you an overview of what we're going to do in the workshop. But first, a disclaimer, which is that different universities have different rules about which Gen AI tools can be used and how. So what we do in this session is not advice on exactly how you should use these tools in your research. Rather, it's a taste of what is possible and quickly becoming the new standard for these types of projects. And so the plan is that for the first half of the session, I'll walk you through an example of setting up a web scraper with Claude. Of course, you don't have to use Claude. You could use other LLMs. But I will take you through what I did to set up this demonstration project, because Claude, as you know, increasingly these tools do require a subscription, and we'd need a much longer session to attempt to do this together on your computer and set it all up. But I really want to attempt to make this as practical as possible. Then I'll show, after I kind of walk you through the steps that I took and also some advice along the way, then I'll show you what the script looks like in my text editor, and we can just have a look at the data that it gets for you. Then the second part of the workshop, we'll see what sort of basic natural language processing can be done with the data collected using modern transformer models. So we can take a look at the code for that, run it, and see some visualizations on the data that was collected in the first half. And I'll explain some of these concepts a bit more as I go along, such as transformer models. when we get to that. But first, I'll just look at the task at hand. So this is the Radio National website for the ABC. And today I'm going to walk through a demo of scraping the transcripts from the Radio National programs. And I think that what's up there is roughly the last 2 weeks, or at least it was the last 2 weeks since I started writing this. And so it will demonstrate how to use Gen AI to write a scraper for a simple website like this. But I actually ran the scraper, and you actually run the scraper yourself. It's not the AI doing it for you. So this has the most recent list of programs. But to understand the structure of the page, we need to know, we need to look at them individually. Each of these headings is a little program. And once you Sorry, why is it not going? Oh, there we go. Once you click on one, like this one, NDIS report delayed, you can see actually what the data looks like and get an idea of the structure of the data. So once you click onto an individual episode, you'll see, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but right down the bottom, there's a transcript. And once you open the transcript on the right, you can see what they look like. So the transcripts have the speaker's name, and then they have what I'm going to be calling their utterances associated with them. So just some things to note here is that when you're collecting the data, or when you're writing a web scraper from this, you want to pull out as much structured data as possible. So, for example, it would be really useful, and it will be really useful to be able to associate the utterances with the person who actually said them. And LLMs can be really good in helping you create more structured data so that your analysis can be more in depth. So this is what Claude Code looks like in my text editor, in the terminal, which is probably the easiest way to interact with it in these projects. So the text editor I use is VS Code. So this took a little bit more so you can see now I'm able to interact with Claude in the terminal, and I'm able to get it to help write scripts for me. So this took a little bit more to set up than just logging into Claude, but not that much more. So first I created an empty project with a tool called UV, which is a really, really fast all-in-one Python package and environment manager. So it does obviously help to have a background in coding. It helps enormously when you're using these tools. And I think sometimes it is the people who already have these skills who benefit from them the most at first. But I think the thing is that it actually didn't really take more than 1 or 2 commands for me to set that up. So I'm not hiding very much here. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about what's called planning mode. So Claude has a planning mode, which is where you can really come up with a plan for what you want to do in this project. And that's really the work that needs to be done by a human being, is actually thinking through what you want to do clearly, and being able to articulate that clearly to the LLM before you actually start doing any coding at all. So the planning mode matters because it clearly separates understanding from acting. And for research, I think understanding is basically most of the project. Once you've once you've actually got that, got your head around that, the doing part is usually a lot easier, and particularly with when you have LLMs helping you with coding, it's much easier. So when you're in plan mode, Claude Code runs read only, so it can only read files, fetch web documentation, that sort of thing. So it's not going to be modifying files until you explicitly approve it to do that. So the plan itself becomes an artifact, and it's a reviewable artifact. So Claude saves it as a markdown file, I think, that persists across sessions. So for a large research task, you can read it, you can change it, revisit it, edit it, and you kind of treat it as a contract for what then gets built. So once you start coding, Claude will ask you to verify the changes it makes, unless you say yes and always allow access to, in my case, my project. It's best that you don't do this, particularly at first. You want to approve changes yourself so that you understand what you are approving. So while these tools are very good, you still don't want to just give them access to files and so on your computer and sort of let them run riot. I mean, I don't think they're necessarily going to run riot, but you always want to be safe, and you want to understand what they're asking you to approve, because I think that the more that you get through a project, and if you're not understanding things, the more that it can get away from you. So this is just an example, and it's not actually an example from my project, but it's an example of Claude asking for clarification before settling on a plan. So the LLMs will actually ask you questions. I grabbed this example because it didn't ask me for clarification when I wrote my scraper. The scraper I'm going to show you, presumably because my instructions were just so clear and detailed. So in this example, the user wanted to refactor a fast API blog into a clean module structure, so rewriting existing code to be better organized or easier to maintain without changing what the code actually does. So they wanted help cleaning up the code structure, mapping out what functions belong together, flag any shared state or circular dependency risks, that sort of thing. And you can see that that Claude is asking follow-up questions and giving you options here. So there's a bunch of different options, and then there's also an option to speak with Claude, or to chat about this, or to continue. So after a lot of back and forth, Claude will craft a plan for you, and it's important, obviously, that you read it in detail and ask for any modifications that you might need before continuing. As mentioned, this plan is reviewable, so it's something that you can come back to. Here, as you can see, the plan is to write a Python scraper that collects transcripts from ABC Radio National and create structured CSV and JSON files for analysis, including metadata such as speakers associated with what they said, the program, any topics or keywords, date, duration, and authors, etc., etc. So what I thought I might get you to do briefly, just as a practical activity, is to just take a very vague task of analyze this radio transcript and write a clear one-paragraph brief. So if you do this in groups, if one of you has access to an LLM, maybe you have your own subscription, or maybe you can paste it into something like Gemini for free. You don't need to have a subscription service to do this, but give it as detailed a paragraph as you can and say this is a plan for your project, and ask it for feedback on this. So I'll give you, sorry, I'm just looking at the clock. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do this and 5 minutes to discuss. So very, very brief. So 10 minutes in total. And we can check back in at like 3:58. And would love to just get your observations on the kind of questions it asks. So I'll give you a little while to do that.
I mean, you could try with the same example. Yeah. Have you done web scraping before? Because this is the kind of task where it's much easier to describe what to do if you've actually done this kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. So it's a good exercise to describe. Well, if you were going to imagine you were sort of telling a colleague, these are the tools.
Hey, Kim, this is Katerina. I'm just going to ask our wonderful AV person to switch the camera so that you could see the room. That might help.
Oh, wow. Hello, people.
Hey. Sorry, we've got a little thing on the screen, but fixing it now. You might see some movement.
So how's everyone going?
So you can send me a message.
Hey, Kim, this is Katerina. I had a chance to speak to one of the groups, and they had an interesting approach. They decided to start with scraping first and then doing the analysis. And one of the members asked Claude directly, so sort of the chatbot version of it, and it refused to do the scraping, or it said that it cannot do the scraping of ABC because of it provided some reasons. Yeah, it said it's not possible for it to do it, but then it found an alternative transcript on a different website, and then it did produce that output. Whereas another participant from that same group, they were using Claude Code, and Claude Code is currently developing that plan for them, and it did not say that it cannot technically do it. Anyway, so that was an interesting, I guess, difference at the scraping stage. Yeah.
That is really interesting because that is kind of what I mentioned at the start. I did not get Claude to actually scrape it for me, but rather to write the scraper with me. Right. So I believe that brings up another really interesting issue is that, if you can, you should. And yeah, sometimes like the LLMs will bring it up themselves and say like, or the robot talks like TXT here says, might say explicitly to scrape the site, but to, scrape it only at this speed. And then sometimes they miss it. So it's always good to check as well. I kind of I just thought I would stick up what I had to go at the same time. And I think too, if you put in things like I put in here that I want to use Python and request, pretty basic. Sometimes they'll go away and assume that they're going to do it that way and, not use one of their own bots or something like that. So, this is something that in your planning mode, you could incorporate, explicitly say, how will I deal with issues like this? Obviously, you don't want to just rely on the LLM to flag it though. So that's really interesting. Any other issues that were brought up, or just see, I'm not sure whether this is what everybody else's did, but mine went away and wrote some suggested code for me as well.
I guess I wanted to probably add, I guess it's going to be a question. There is a difference between what Claude actually is. So as you access it, Claude.com or .md, I want to say .md version, Claude.com, and then Claude Code. So basically, they run the same model. They both use, wherever you choose, Sonnet, Opus, Haiku, whichever one you prefer for your job. But Claude Code is an environment in itself that's designed for coding to perform specific tasks. And then as a product, it also plans the tasks for you to, so you give it a task and it breaks it down. And it's got this mechanism. So it would, for example, if to achieve a specific goal, it would deploy sub-agents. So for example, you tell it, I need that website scraped. And it's going to design an approach for it to scrape it. And it's going to go online and it's going to try and scrape it. Whilst if you access it directly through Claude from the website, it would just provide you a response. So because it does not deploy sub-agents, it does not have this functionality usually. I mean, yeah, most likely not. So depending on the task. So Claude Code is a different product, basically. It's designed to do a different workflow, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, I think as well, and I just kind of thought before about, like, I'm sure that probably most of you are aware of, like, robots.txt. It's not a, requirement. It is a polite suggestion, and as researchers, we should definitely be following those, and we don't need to be acting like bots as well. But I think one thing that it raises that's interesting as well is that a lot of the time they just don't want to have LLMs sucking up huge amounts of data from their website. And that's probably what the ABC doesn't want. So they're usually not aimed at researchers. Anything else that anyone wanted to share?
Perhaps on the analysis side of things,
Oh yeah, somebody has already done my analysis for me.
So it did it. I have a scraper and I have the first page with 16 transcripts done. I'm looking at the JSON files now, but it looks like still playing with this. I just installed it. Yeah, no, it looks like it has the transcripts, but it's not entirely clear if it has all of the information associated with the transcripts. Would you recommend, like, in the scraping process, to be a bit more specific about, the entirety of the transcript? It seems like, at the very least in this one example, it's actually kind of long, so it might have it all, but
some of them are very short, so it could just be you're looking at a very short one.
Oh, never mind. Okay, it's all there. Yay. Never mind.
did anyone actually get to the analysis stage or only the collection? Topic analysis?
Based on the topic, back again, I think for the scraping things, I prefer to do it more with the code rather than with Claude directly, because of that. I think Claude as an LLM, if we don't use the code, it's gonna search about the rules. For example, the laws in Australia, and also the information from the website, whether they allow that website to be scraped or not, and then they're very obedient to that. So if it says no, and then they will, no, we cannot do that. But with Python 1, we can do that, scraping things. And then the second one, from the topic analysis, I tried to ask Claude about the topic analysis. It gives with category of parliamentary process and timing, reform substance and rationale, negotiation and amendments, fiscal and urgency considerations. And also it highlights the key points of the transcripts that actually talks about that each category, why it belongs to parliamentary process and timing, which text that actually fits in with that, within that category. So it's good for analysis because you have the example and also the classification, and you still can check it as a human researcher whether it actually makes sense or not based on that.
I think also I think about reproducibility as well. If you have this analysis, how do you make sure that you can share that with other people, and how do you make sure that you could other people could reproduce it or perform the same tasks on different kinds of data sets? And this is something you can do easily enough if you have code as an output that you can share with people and publish and everything else. But if you've sort of just asked AI for a thematic summary of something, it's very difficult to build that into a reproducible workflow on its own.
Yeah, I think that was a really good point that that the last speaker before Daniel was making, because I think the other day I was looking at scraping data from one of the states, like ministerial diaries, so where ministers, they're actually required to publish and to make public their diaries, with who they're meeting with, so which lobbyists, or not just lobbyists. And I think one of the states, they had a kind of just a default robot.txt file that was you can't scrape this site. And it's literally the point of this site is that you make these things available to the public, but it was just an old default one. So yeah, you do need to have, sometimes the LLMs can be overzealous in following the rules, and it is up to you to understand what legal obligations there are, as well as your duty as to do research in the public interest. So as well, you'll see you will be prompted to review the code that the AI is writing. I think I can probably. And also, it's always good to validate the results. So if you're running the script yourself, that's one way of validating it. But also, you might want to try other ways of running it and seeing whether you get a different result when you run it or whether you get the same result. And this is just going to be a quick activity, which I will put up in the next slide. But this is just having a go at actually, if people want to spot the errors, it's kind of like the spot the difference. But actually have a go at spotting some errors in this data that the LLM has collected for you. So I'll just give you 5 minutes to see what you can pick up, and try to only use your eyes and not actually use the internet or an LLM to do this. So basically see how many you can pick up. And I don't know, the more you pick up, the larger your moral victory. I don't have any prizes.
Any takers? Yeah, AM/PM for program, Kim, is that something that we could count as an error?
Could you say that again?
I don't know. I'm not sure if the program should be named AM, PM, and then World Today.
PM. Yeah, that's a good one.
That's a mistake, right? That's a different part of the transcript, or is it indeed the name of the program, of a program?
I think AM is definitely the name of the program. PM, sorry, I rolled through there. Yeah, so I think they're both names of programs.
Okay, that's useful to know. Anything else?
The first two rows are the same, and I think that is the first error. The second one is a leftover p tag on the row number 4. I think otherwise pretty clean.
Yep, you picked up on, so we need to deduplicate. And there's some leftover HTML tags in the transcript. Another one that snuck in there is there's an incorrect date, so there's no 13th.
Yeah. Well, we have Claire here who noticed that already as well.
Okay. So Claire wins. There we go.
Yay, Claire!
So the next step.
Just quickly, the dates are very tricky because you might have cases where you're actually scraping something, and you can have, firstly, the dates could just be messy. that's actually not too bad, because at least like it's very clear. You can't pass them as dates. You could have all sorts of situations where you have dates in multiple formats from multiple different countries. One thing's a month in one row, but it's a year in, it's a day in another row, and all of that. So there's all sorts of like subtle bugs that can come into these things that could sort of cascade into sort of bigger data issues later.
I know a meme about that. I'll bring it tomorrow and sneak into one of the slides. One of those, yes. Look forward to it.
Just have a question. Would the presence of duplicates be necessarily an error? Because if the page features both of these entries, like 2 entries on the page, and then if the program scraped it, technically the program is not wrong. It's just it captured both entries if there are actual duplicate entries on the page. So I guess that wouldn't be a faulty output in this case.
No, it would just be cleaning that you would do after the fact, and then their decisions that you want to make. It depends on what you're interested in, right? Like, sometimes if you were scraping news data, for example, you might get duplicate titles and you might get a duplicate timestamp, but there might be differences in the text, and that might be really interesting to you if you're a researcher in journalism, because sometimes when you're collecting data, so for one project, I found this quite a lot, is that you would find that they go back and, like, instead of actually correcting a mistake they'd made, they just actually change the article essentially. And so I'd have both copies of the article before and after, because you're scraping. And so actually you could do a whole research project on that. It would be really interesting, because, they're obviously meant to make a retraction and say when they've made mistakes. So yeah, it could be really important, or it could be not interesting to you whatsoever, and you want to drop them. So that's a really good point. So this is what some successful output looks like. So I might actually just stop sharing this and show you what it looks like for real life, as they say in Bluey. I'm just going to share my text editor when I find it. So this is an example of the JSON data. So there's also, like, I made JSON and CSV because for some reason I couldn't make up my mind. But it's just kind of more human readable in JSON format. So as well, I have episodes, which is data by episode, and then data by utterance, which is so that, so there's this episode ID, it has sequence, so you can have multiple utterances will have the same episode ID, and it tells you the sequence, and it has the speaker, and then it has this little block tag, which kind of at first seems like a mistake, but actually, I don't know if I can find an example. There are a few that are different. So this is just, the tag that was used to grab the speakers, but some of the speakers, like here, this is an example. So have this at stand first, which is actually the ABC's way of marking that this is not actually an interviewee, but it's kind of like a little narration from an ABC journalist. So it might be saying something like, and now I'm going to hand over to so-and-so to interview Anthony Albanese, or something like that. So that kind of data is actually useful. And so before I get into some analysis, so doing some natural language processing and analysis of the data, I wanted to hand over to Daniel briefly, just to talk about the dark and the light side of vibe coding.
Cool,
so
thanks.
I'm just going to share the presentation again, Daniel.
Thanks, Kim. If you could share it again, that would be good, because I don't have it up here. People can still hear me okay? How many people have heard of this term, vibe coding? It was fairly novel not that long ago, and now it's everywhere. And this is really just to do with the idea that AI tools have democratized access, if you like, to technology. So now you have all sorts of people building apps, websites, other things, without any sort of understanding of what's really happening, but they sort of work and people are happy because they can produce sort of interesting outputs. There's the question of, well, how do you distinguish between someone using a coding agent who knows how to use this, who knows how to code, and someone who's sort of vibing, if you like? And probably the line is that if you're vibe coding, maybe you don't know what the code is doing and you don't even look at it, and you're really just going on what the output is. Do you want to move on, Kim? Move on, Kim? Okay, so AI tools and LLMs do things very quickly. They can produce lots of code very fast. That's great if you know what it is and what it does, and it's sort of doing exactly what you want. Now, if we take the web scraping example, if you've built 100 web scrapers before, you can very clearly describe exactly what you want, which tools you want to use, all of that, and you will likely get a reliable output and understand what's happening because you've done it before and you're able to sort of articulate that in putting it together. As if you're working on larger projects, as projects get bigger, it's very common that you sort of lose track of some things. Some of our projects at our research group, you can have hundreds of files that sort of perform different analysis or visualization or other sort of machine learning related tasks. So it's natural that there's some sort of drop off in your understanding of code and what it's doing. But in this space where we have these machines generating AI, generating code faster and faster, increasingly there's a risk between that there's a bigger and bigger gap between the code that's out there and your understanding of what it's doing. And obviously the bigger this comprehension gap, the bigger the risk of things sort of potentially going a little bit wrong. Next slide. Cool. So I kind of like this house example for vibe coding. So if you're sort of experienced as a coder, even if you're using AI to help the process, you probably go through similar steps. You know, Kim talked before about setting up an environment, making sure you have sort of some solid foundations. You might sort of choose the packages that you want to use, make sure that the latest ones are there. You might sort of slowly build up a database or some kind of other foundation. When people are vibe coding, generally they're just sort of looking at the end product and the output. And this is great because you can get something that's sort of up very quickly that looks sort of really nice and shiny. But the problem sort of comes later on in terms of sustainability. Because if you don't understand how something works, then increasingly the complexity under the hood becomes a major issue. And generally these projects tend to fall apart and can't be sustained. So a lot of the time these tools are very good for like sort of a quick mock-up or a demonstration, but if people are vibe coding without sort of really understanding what's happening, then it tends not to be particularly sustainable, especially in a sort of research or data context where you want to sort of have something robust and reproducible and share that with other people. Next slide. Next slide. Cool. I need to... Yeah, so what are the advantages and opportunities? Obviously, these things help to really sort of democratize access. They can make it much faster to prototype ideas and get a sense of whether something is a good idea to begin with and get feedback on prototypes. You know, sometimes it doesn't matter if something won't last forever, if it's not sustainable, if it's something that's a useful tool for a particular purpose in the interim. often people are using these things to build very simple static websites for a blog post or for their homepage or the CV or something like that. And also, I think important is the sort of the pedagogical dimensions of these things. The people that are best at leveraging AI tools in coding and other contexts are those that sort of engage deeply and thoughtfully in the process and sort of maybe push back, maybe get the AI to push back. But it's not simply a matter of sort of asking for something and then you have it. So this question of like the speed at which we do things is really important, because ultimately we have responsibility for the things that we produce. So even though these things help to sort of speed up the coding, it's important that we ourselves are able to maintain a connection with what we're doing. Were there more slides, Kim, or was that the last one? Oh yeah, well, so increasingly there's very good training in this space. This is one example of an AI fluency framework. I really like this because it's focused on us as humans and not on the technology. You know, so often we're talking about like the limitations of particular models and particular tools and everything else, but we don't think enough about, well, you know, how do we develop the skills to decide what we should be delegating to these technologies? How do we develop the skills to accurately and completely describe what we're working with? How do we effectively make sure that we can evaluate and discern the quality of what comes back? And diligence, lastly, is about accountability. How do we ultimately take accountability for what's produced, make sure we actually read it and look at it and sort of make sure that it's robust and complete and sort of serves the purpose that we intended to in a particular context, and we're transparent about how we're using these tools as well. So I definitely encourage people to look up some of the training materials in this space. There's plenty of sort of technical training, but I think it's also important and useful to step back and think about, well, how do we train ourselves to sort of reason about working with these technologies, as well as sort of understanding the technical frameworks and other sort of technical dimensions of these tools. So I think that's it, Kim.
Thanks, Daniel. So I'm just going to do a little introduction to the tools that I'll be using for the textual analysis. So I did say that I would talk a little bit about this, but transformers are a type of AI design which were introduced in 2017. I think it was around, there was a very famous paper which I kind of remember reading at the time or just after, called Attention is All You Need. And then sometime after that, there was this explosion in AI. So it's kind of an interesting time to be in this space. But it's basically what powers most modern language tools, including ChatGPT and Claude. Their thing is all about attention, which is the ability to weigh which words in a sentence matter most to each other. So the AI can better understand context, and it's better able to disambiguate, things that are in a different context. Like I think one example that's used a lot is like the bank by the river, being able to immediately understand what is meant by bank there, and also just being able to have a lot more context than previous models could. So I'll also be what you'll be seeing here is the Jupyter Notebook, which is a tool that lets you write and run code in small chunks. So I'm sure that some of you have used the Jupyter Notebook or used different sort of notebooks like Google Colab that are similar. And so you can think of it like a notebook. So instead of running an entire program at once, you can test out one piece or sort of one cell, as they're called, at a time to see immediate results. And that's sort of what we want with when we're doing just a bit of quick textual analysis. So they're very popular with data scientists and researchers, also because they allow you, and you'll see when I show you mine, they allow you to mix like Markdown, and so you can have text with your results. So it's a really good way to kind of to demonstrate what you've done, and to be able to give a tutorial or at a conference display your work. So the other thing that I'm going to be using for the transformer models is something called Hugging Face. So it's essentially kind of like an app store or community hub for AI. So it's a website where people share ready-made AI models, data sets, and tools, so you don't have to build everything from scratch. So if you want an AI that translates text, from different languages, or does some image recognition, you can grab one for free. So it's quite good for in that it's quite accessible. So I'll just switch to my text editor. So can you all see that? Yeah. Yes. So this is, sorry, I'm just trying to move my the Teams menu around. Okay, so this notebook, as part of the, my plan for this project, I asked it to write up a notebook with some basic natural language tasks in it. And it did that for me, but I had to modify it myself, not because Claude got anything wrong or because it came up, like with inappropriate analyses. It was simply because what was applied was quite boring. So just kind of shows you that you can't just ask it to run something and it'll automatically be interesting and give you the answers you want. You need to be able to get into the data yourself and be able to direct it and see things that are interesting. So I'll run all this first. So I'm running all this live. So hopefully it doesn't take too long. Some of the models are rather large, so we'll see how we go. But basically, it is grabbing the data from the project from, I'll just show you here. See, you can see here, it's grabbing it from here. I'm not sure if you can see hopefully you can see my cursor. So that's where we're getting the data for analysis. So I'm importing these libraries to help me do the analysis. And this is actually from Hugging Face, what I'll use to do the analyses. So it lists, we've got here the different models from Hugging Face that I'll be using. So using a sentiment analysis model that's been trained on Twitter data. Also using named entity recognition, and that's a BERT model, and also another model that's been trained on Facebook data, which is doing zero-shot topic classification. And that's basically where, this is using the new transformers to do this, where it is, it's not been trained on my data to do topic modeling. It's a pre-trained data, and it is kind of what it sounds like. It's just giving, one shot at analyzing that. So I've run my imports. Now I'm going to import my data here, and it's just going to show me. So AM is a program. I don't know about PM. Maybe I confused myself. Maybe I put in an extra PM instead of AM. So you can see that AM being a program that runs every morning. Most of the episodes are from there, so it gives you a count for all of them. So here I'm collecting the data into categories per per people, places, and topics, which I'm going to actually populate later. So this might take a little bit longer to run. So this is actually running the sentiment analysis on the data. Yep. So here it's loading the RoBERTa model, which has been fine-tuned on tweets. And so it's going to do three-way analysis or sentiment analysis, so get negative, neutral, positive, and run it on all of the utterances. So for each text, it's going to return a dictionary with the label, so neutral, and a score. So the scores should be between -1 and 1. So we could have a label, but as well we can keep the score for later, so that we can compare them more to each other. Okay, so it's finished, and it's telling us here that so about 58% of the utterances are neutral, which is not surprising given it's a radio program. It's not like we're looking at X or somewhere like that where you might get a lot of uncivil language, for instance. So about 20% positive and 20% negative. And so now I'm actually going to see. Sorry, run this. Oh, there we go. So now you can actually. This visualization is showing you on average their sentiment for different programs. So this is at least starting to get a bit more interesting now. So I don't know, has anybody listened to Stories from the Pacific? It sounds like it would maybe be a lovely program to listen to if you need to feel better about the world. And Wait, They Did What? I have no idea what that show is about, but quite a lot of negative discourse apparently. So you can also do a bit of a sanity check. So what this is doing is that I think it's looking up like the most negative and most positive responses and just returning not the whole episodes, but or not the whole utterances, but just a little bit of the utterances, so that you can manually check how the sentiment analysis is working. So we can see very positive. It's an excellent time for football lovers because the FIFA World Cup is here. So I don't know if we have any soccer fans, but I think you can tell that I'm not a soccer fan because I call it soccer. But the World Cup even I know that the World Cup has been going on in America. Yeah. And so also when we have a look at negative, we can see it's horrible and it's unlikely to change. This is one of the most devastating wars anywhere in the world since World War II. So that seems pretty negative. And those sentences seem to me to be intuitively right. So this is an example. In this example, we're using the named entity recognition to pull out the most talked about people and places. And so I'll just get this to run. I don't think it takes. This shouldn't take too long, but I think this is probably the one that takes the longest. And there's also some cleaning up to be done here, and you'll see in the results, and none of this is perfect. You would, this is some quick analysis, and you would do a lot more data cleaning and so on. But some of the data cleaning that's going on here is that the model sometimes splits up names inappropriately. So the example here is Keir Starmer, which I don't know why he would be in the news. I'm sure that everyone knows that he's stepped down. So what it does is that it does some merging of adjacent names when they're actually the same person, so a person's first and last name. So I think that ran So this is aggregating sentiment per person and also by places. So that's now trying to, you can get quite powerful when you start to combine your analyses. So this is the topics here. So out of 100 episodes, only 45 have ABC provided topics. So that was one of the things that I asked when I was designing the scraper, was that I asked it to get any metadata that exists, because, you know, often in news websites, they will tag either the news or radio, they'll tag it by topic. And a lot of the time they do this because they want, you know, for search engine optimization. So, but out of the 45, only 45 out of the 100 episodes actually had an ABC provided topic. So what was done here is that it used the topics that do exist to categorize the other topics, as well as just adding in some generic topics. So the downside of this is that if some of the topics weren't labeled because they were just a completely different topic, those may not be captured. So there are perhaps better ways to do this, but this was just a quick way of doing it. You know, for instance, you could give it, if there are other websites that have news topics, you could put those topics in as well, so that it can classify against those as well. So this is just a quick sort of the top topics. So the top topic is politics and Australia, and then the United States. So the topic modeling is done by the episode. And so here what we're going to do is we're going to label each of the utterances from the episode with the topic that was found. So now we might actually get some results here. So what's been shown now is kind of a mixture of all the different analyses. So I should show you, there's the sentiment. So the average sentiment, I'm sort of tried to make this. So one thing that trying to make it more intuitive is that the positive sentiment is green and negative sentiment is red, and in the middle is neutral. So topics, Australia is fairly positive. Children, very negative. Children more negative than war. I don't know, one thing that you could investigate is that because they're talking about...
I think I have investigated this. This is Katerina. So there is a show that one, wait, they did what? It's a kids show. And it's about, like, it's telling kids all the stupid things that adults used to do back in the past. Like the fact that people used to smoke indoors or put leeches on someone as a way of treating them. So I think that show would be the outlier that explains the negativity around children.
Ah, right. I assumed that it was just written by parents, and that's why it was so negative. I'm joking. So that, again, is in important context. And here you can also see that war is negative. Crime is positive. Again, something to investigate. It could be someone, it could be about someone being rehabilitated, for instance, or crime prevention. And social media, it's not much, but it's a little bit positive. And so if we look at places here, where you can see that places where there are currently wars happening are quite negative, which is understandable. Interestingly, everybody's just kind of cool about the Strait of Hormuz. We just kind of have neutral feelings about it. And then you can see, I'm not sure about, like, oh, this is another limitation that you would fix if you're doing more in-depth analysis. But you can probably see here that there's people like, Trevor, Sam and Mel, and they are probably presenters. So you would need to, it wouldn't be too difficult to actually pull those people out of the named entity recognition if you're not interested in that. As well as you can see, there's Donald Trump appears twice, so you'd want to go through and merge those entries as well. So I think that probably in the interest of time, I'll leave it there. I was not so impressed with these graphs. So here I was trying to do a heat map that kind of looks at how much, well, the number, here it's the number of utterances that occur for a particular topic in particular programs. Does that make sense? So in an AM, they talk about Australia a lot. They also talk about politics a lot. Oh no, PM is the show. There we go. So the health report talks about Australia a lot, also talks about health a bit. So maybe it looks like that's kind of working. And so this last one includes, oh, what did I do? I don't think I've not actually run everything, have I? So it gave me an error there because I didn't actually run that. And so it's like, hey, I don't have this variable. So here you also get the sentiment. Yes, you're completely right. So wait, they did what? That's the program that's talking about children, and it's coming up skewing negative, and you can see that it's all coming from that one program. So I just did some limitations. Like I mentioned, it's only getting 100 episodes, and so you could set up a scraper to get much more. And I kind of talked about fixing up. So one thing you might want to do is that it looks like the ABC's transcripts are auto-generated. And so that data is not completely clean. And you could do something like fuzzy matching that would look for very close matches, and you can merge them if they're the same. So there's a lot more that you can do, but you can see how quickly you can generate something like this, where you can already get a bit of a feel for your data. And like I said earlier, there were a lot of analyses that it suggested that I canned and rewrote and changed, things like looking at linguistic things like looking at and comparing the length of utterances and things like that just weren't particularly interesting for news data. So I think this can be a really good way of very quickly getting to know your data, and also without too much effort, being able to try out different analyses so you know what direction to take. And then you can then, so I'll stop sharing that. And then once you found a direction, you can really pour in your precious time as a human into making that analysis and the code base as stable as possible. And so I wanted to, because I know that we don't have very long, I wanted to ask whether people had any questions. Do we have time for a few questions?
We do have time for questions. Thank you, Bogdan.
Are we finishing at 10:02 or is it 5?
We're finishing at 5. But yes, questions? If not, I'll ask one. While people thinking, I'll ask. I really enjoyed the session. It was a great combination of practical examples, but also the reflection on vibe coding. So I'm just reflecting on the way I learned Python before large language models. I'm a humanities person. I'm totally self-taught in my programming, but I really enjoyed the process of learning. It was definitely tough in terms of trying to get to, you have to learn so many things. You need to be able to first install Python on your computer. How do you even do that? How do you understand the different versioning, the libraries, all of these things? These days you can get Claude to do it all for you, and you kind of skip that layer, right? You get straight to the output, you get straight to the vibe coding, I guess. But in your experience, or maybe if you teach, or maybe even in terms of guesses that you might have, can you actually combine the best of both worlds and kind of teach yourself, or get Claude teach you Python as you sort of work on tasks, or is it too much of a bootstrapping, or like building a ladder as you are standing on it? Is that even possible? Sorry if it's a fuzzy question, but yeah, that's sort of my biggest concern right now.
I don't know if I have a great answer to this, except that I think that I, like you, am really, well, you didn't say you were grateful, but I am really grateful that I learnt how to code before AI, because I think, and I think maybe this gets to the anxiety behind your question, is that I think that a lot of the time LLMs are better for doing than they are for understanding and learning. All those going to Stack Overflow, reading through all of that and reading through documentation to when I was learning how to code, I think that really helped. I think you can use these tools in a way that leaves a lot more room for your own growth as well. So I think probably some of what Daniel was talking about as well, really, well, I guess part of it is that looking to the future, all of the skills of like writing out dictionaries, of like writing out for loops, of I'm talking very much like about Python, all of these sort of skills are things that are really better done now by AI. Like the coding is better, that, so I think that maybe part of the answer is that, yes, it's like I really value already understanding, a lot of the things that are happening, but that like previous tools that kind of supersede, like, we don't know what's going on underneath Python, we know it's kind of C code and, yes,
but, absolutely. Yeah. There's so much more of that stack, right? That I may not be familiar with, or only have a very sketchy understanding of.
One really interesting way to think about this is thinking, one interesting way to think about this is thinking, okay, well, what if the English language was a programming language? Because that's sort of the direction that we're heading. And that sort of changes everything, but it also changes nothing. I can already sort of, if you have to sit down and write an essay or something, you still need to think about the process that you're going through. And even though these AI tools help with constructing syntax, you still have to sort of engage with what you're doing and why, and what's the sort of underlying methodology, because we're abstracting away in some cases the code itself, but it means we maybe that saves us some time, but then we sort of reinvest that time in thinking more deeply about what we're doing and why, and maybe also sort of upskilling ourselves. I have certainly seen examples where people started like vibe coding websites and then used the AI themselves to actually learn web development properly, if you want to call it that, like fully understand, the technologies and how they work. But it's all to do with like how much you engage, taking your time with the technologies and sort of thinking deeply about what you're putting in and what comes out.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's really hopeful that you've seen examples of that. And Kim, just to confirm that I am indeed glad that I learned how to code before AI as well. Any other questions?
Will you guys be sharing some of the codes in like 6 GitHub so that we can have a look at it ourselves?
Can we get you on Jupyter Notebook that you were just showing us, Kim?
Yeah, so I did actually have a go before the workshop of like trying to make it so that you could run this code yourself, but I thought that it would probably take up too much time. But I was planning on sharing a Google Drive with the data, and you can open it in Google Colab, and I've got some instructions, so I don't know, Bogdan, whether that could be shared around afterwards. Is that possible?
Absolutely, yes. We will share all these tools. Yeah.
Right, and I'll there's some instructions, but basically the only tricky thing is that you just need to make sure that your Google Colab knows where the data is. That's literally the only tricky thing. I also made sure I only used packages that were already installed in Google Colab. So I don't think you should even really have to install anything.
Perfect. That's really thoughtful of you. Thank you so much, Kim. Any other questions? I know everybody's anxious to wrap up. It's been a long day, but it was a really, really useful session. And we're very grateful for the opportunity to have you both here.
It's also, I guess we need to mention that Kim and Daniel, they run House Task Force, a series of workshops that help social scientists acquire certain skills, Python, web scraping, and using API to collect APIs, social media platform APIs, and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. So I guess if you're keen to learn something new, so feel free to find them. I guess Has Task Force, that's what they call it, and then we will share the materials. And thank you so much. It's been great.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Thanks a lot.